Signs your dog is uncomfortable. Throughout the course, we talk a lot about making sure your dog is below or at threshold, and that we're not putting him in a position where he's forced to cope with more than he can handle. So, how can you tell whether you've crossed that line? Well, first, we need to understand that signs of discomfort are often much more subtle than the bigger, more obvious signs that your dog is feeling extremely fearful. Let's look at obvious versus subtle signs of discomfort. Examples of obvious signs are crouching low to the ground, or trembling, hiding, growling, barking, whimpering, drooling, or running away. The more subtle signs include turning their head away, or freezing, directing their gaze away, or suddenly closing their mouth tightly, licking their lips, shifting their body weight in the opposite direction, like leaning back or away slightly, or pinning or flicking their ears back, or yawning even. Now keep in mind that discomfort still represents a certain level of feeling threatened, even if it doesn't look like stereotypical fear or panic, which we tend to recognize as very dramatic behavior in both dogs and humans. One can still feel somewhat threatened without acting out dramatically. Now, in order to move forward with a DS process where we aim to ensure that our dog doesn't feel threatened, it's important to recognize these more subtle signs. If your dog continues to feel threatened as we gradually expose him to the scary thing, we won't succeed at changing his emotional response. Remember that if your dog appears to tolerate the scary thing, because he knows he'll get a treat afterwards, that's operant learning. That's not desensitization nor counter conditioning. Using this example of a treat being available to your dog, operant learning means this. At this moment, if you do this, then you will get a good thing. And you may remember from the first lesson that classical conditioning doesn't require your dog to do anything. And again, using the example of a treat being available to your dog, respondent learning means this. At this moment, a good thing will happen, regardless of what you do or don't do. We're aiming to affect his emotional response, not his behavior, although by affecting his emotional response, we will very likely end up affecting his behavior in a good way. So watch your dog carefully in the next few days and look for signs that you may have missed in the past that indicate that he's feeling uncomfortable. These subtle signs will usually come before the more obvious ones. For example, if your dog freezes and refuses to jump into the car because he's afraid, which is an obvious sign, you may now notice that when you picked up your keys, he yawned and licked his lips, which is a more subtle sign. If your dog runs and hides when you start the vacuum, or he lunges and barks at it, all obvious signs. You may notice that earlier, when you reached into the closet to pull out the vacuum, he began pacing a little, or breathing a little faster, maybe panting, or his ears were lowered. All of these are more subtle signs. Play detective over the next few days and take mental notes. This will help you determine what your dog's threshold really is. And note that it's not necessary to deliberately put your dog in a position that will cause him to experience fear. Please avoid doing that.